Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Adam Newman, cornered by fear, shame, and a lifetime of rejection, loses control and strikes the one person he swore he would never hurt, his son Connor, detonating consequences that will echo through the Newman dynasty for years to come, because it all begins quietly, deceptively so, with a DNA envelope that looks no different from 1,000 others. A sterile rectangle of paper that somehow contains the power to rewrite identities, annihilate trust, and redraw bloodlines. And when that envelope is open, the world tilts off its axis as the results reveal the unthinkable. Adam Newman is not Connor's biological father, a revelation that instantly reframes every bedtime story, every hard-won moment of bonding, every fight Adam ever had to prove he was worthy of being called Dad. And the shockwave does not stop with Adam, because Connor, who has already endured more emotional whiplash than any child should, senses the tremor before the words are even spoken, his intuition sharpened by years of living among adults who traffic in secrets like currency. And when he finally hears it, when the truth is laid bare in a room thick with tension and denial, Connor's face hardens, his voice cracks, and the words tear out of him like glass. "He is not my father." A declaration that feels less like discovery and more like betrayal, because in Connor's heart Adam was not just a biological label, but a promise, a protector, a constant in a world that keeps shifting under his feet. And Adam, who has spent his entire life fighting the ghost of Victor Newman's disapproval, suddenly sees that same judgment reflected in his son's eyes, a mirror he cannot bear to face. And instead of rising to the moment, instead of choosing compassion, Adam fractures. Years of rage and abandonment boiling over as he hears not just a child's pain but the echo of his own childhood rejection. The echo of every time Victor made him feel illegitimate, disposable, and lesser. And in that split second Adam does the unthinkable. His hand moves before his mind can stop it. The slap lands sharp and loud, and the room freezes as time itself seems to recoil in horror, because this is not just a slap. It is the shattering of a sacred boundary, the moment Adam becomes the thing he has always sworn he would never be, and Connor's eyes widen not with anger, but with disbelief. The kind that burrows deep and rewrites how a child understands safety, and the silence afterward is suffocating, broken only by the sound of Adam's own breath as realization crashes down on him, because the slap is not just violence. It is proof of failure, and immediately the walls close in as Chelsea rushes forward, her maternal instincts igniting into fury and terror as she pulls Connor into her arms, her eyes blazing at Adam with a mixture of heartbreak and resolve, because this is the line that cannot be uncrossed. And across town the fallout begins to ripple outward like a shockwave through Genoa City, as Victor Newman, who has always claimed ownership over truth and bloodlines, is forced to confront the irony that his family's obsession with legacy has once again destroyed one of its own, and Nikki, torn between her loyalty to her son and her moral compass, feels the weight of generations pressing down as she wonders whether the Newman name itself is cursed, while Nick, ever the reluctant mediator, recognizes the pattern all too well. The way secrets rot families from the inside until something breaks. And something has broken irrevocably here, because the DNA results do more than expose biology. They expose the fragile scaffolding Adam built to hold himself together. And as whispers spread through the Abbott mansion, Jack Abbott cannot help but reflect on his own tangled history of paternity lies and stolen identities, seeing in Adam's downfall a grim reminder that truth delayed is truth weaponized. And meanwhile Connor, now withdrawn and shaken, begins to question everything, replaying memories through a new lens, wondering whether Adam's temper, his intensity, his desperation were always warning signs. And the child's confusion becomes the most devastating casualty of all, because children do not have the luxury of compartmentalizing betrayal. They absorb it whole, and Adam, left alone with the echo of his actions, spirals into self-loathing, pacing the darkened living room as the magnitude of what he has done crashes over him in relentless waves, because the slap was not just against Connor. It was against the fragile hope that Adam could be better than the men who hurt him, and now the question that haunts Genoa City is not simply who Connor's biological father is, though that mystery looms ominously, threatening to drag yet another unsuspecting man into the storm, but whether Adam can ever repair the damage he has inflicted, whether forgiveness is possible when innocence has been shattered. And as the days unfold, the story grows darker and more complex, with Chelsea wrestling with the impossible choice of protecting her son while acknowledging the complicated love that once bound their family, with legal ramifications whispered in hushed tones as social services and custody battles hover like vultures, and with Victor quietly mobilizing, determined to control the narrative, to spin a story in a way that preserves the Newman empire even as it crumbles from within. Because Victor understands better than anyone that perception is power, and yet even he cannot fully contain the moral outrage sparked by Adam's actions, as Genoa City's residents take sides, some condemning Adam outright, others insisting on context, on trauma, on the long shadow of Victor's parenting, but the truth remains brutally simple. A child was hurt, and that fact eclipses all justifications, and as Connor begins therapy, his small voice haltingly articulating fears of abandonment and identity loss, the audience is confronted with the raw reality that soap opera drama, at its best, mirrors real pain, real consequences, and real cycles of abuse, and Adam's journey becomes one of reckoning rather than redemption, as he confronts the possibility that love alone is not enough, that intentions do not erase harm, and that sometimes the bravest act is stepping away, even when it breaks your heart, and when the question of Connor's biological father finally comes to the forefront. Hints pointing toward a past affair, a forgotten night, a manipulated test. The revelation promises yet another seismic shift, because whoever that man is will inherit not just a son but a battlefield, and through it all the central image lingers, indelible and haunting. Adam's hand raised, Connor's shocked eyes, the instant when everything changed, reminding viewers that in The Young and the Restless, the most explosive twists are not car crashes or corporate takeovers, but the moments when human weakness collides with love, and the fallout is measured not in money or power, but in broken trust, shattered childhoods, and the agonizing question of whether some mistakes can ever truly be undone. And yet the story does not end with that slap. It metastasizes, spreading into every corner of Genoa City like a slow-burning fire that refuses to be extinguished, because the moment Adam's hand struck Connor was merely the ignition point for a far more devastating reckoning, one that forces every character to confront not just what they have done, but who they truly are when the lies are stripped away. And in the aftermath, Adam is left staring at his reflection in a mirror that suddenly feels foreign, seeing not the misunderstood son, not the brilliant outsider clawing for a place at the Newman table, but a frightened man who became the embodiment of his worst fears, and the weight of that realization crushes him as memories flood back. Victor's cold dismissals, the endless comparisons to Nick, the subtle and not-so-subtle reminders that he was different, damaged, expendable. And Adam begins to understand with horrifying clarity how generational trauma operates, how it sneaks into the bloodstream of a family and poisons even the most sincere attempts at love, because despite all his vows to protect Connor from the pain he endured, Adam has unknowingly passed the torch, and that truth is almost unbearable, while Chelsea, grappling with her own storm of emotions, oscillates between fury and grief, because she knows Adam's darkness intimately, yet never imagined it would manifest this way. And her priority becomes brutally simple: Connor's safety, Connor's healing, Connor's future, even if it means cutting Adam out of their lives entirely, a decision that tears at her heart but steadies her spine. And as she takes Connor away from the Newman chaos, the boy retreats into a shell of quiet observation, asking fewer questions, but thinking more deeply than ever, absorbing adult conversations he pretends not to hear, internalizing blame that does not belong to him, and wondering if love is conditional, if fathers leave or lash out when the truth becomes inconvenient. And therapy sessions reveal the depth of the wound, as Connor struggles to articulate the sense of displacement gnawing at him, the feeling that his very identity has been yanked out from under him like a rug, and these scenes force the audience to confront the uncomfortable reality that children in soap operas are not immune to lasting damage, that a single act of violence can rewrite the emotional architecture of a life. And while Connor tries to make sense of his world, Genoa City buzzes with speculation about the identity of his biological father, a mystery that quickly becomes the town's obsession, with theories flying like shrapnel. Was it a forgotten lover, a calculated deception, or something even darker, perhaps another instance of Victor Newman's invisible hand manipulating fate behind the scenes? And Victor himself, sensing the danger of losing control over the narrative, begins maneuvering with his trademark ruthlessness, summoning lawyers, issuing warnings, and quietly investigating the DNA lab, because if there is one thing Victor cannot tolerate, it is chaos he did not engineer, and yet even he is shaken by Adam's collapse, confronted with the possibility that his lifelong cruelty may have finally produced an outcome too ugly to spin away, and Nikki, caught between protecting her son and protecting her grandson, becomes the emotional conscience of the storyline, challenging Victor's instinct to dominate rather than heal, reminding him that power cannot fix what love has broken, while Nick, haunted by his own complicated relationship with Adam, tries to bridge the widening chasm, reaching out in cautious empathy even as he condemns Adam's actions, embodying the painful truth that accountability and compassion are not mutually exclusive. And across town at the Abbott mansion, Jack reflects deeply on the parallels between his family's history and the Newmans, recognizing that stolen identities and falsified paternities are wounds that never fully heal, and he wonders aloud whether Genoa City itself is cursed, a town built on ambition and secrets where children pay the highest price for adult sins. And as the narrative unfolds, Adam's isolation intensifies. Stripped of Connor, shunned by Chelsea, and viewed with suspicion by friends and foes alike, he begins a descent that feels less like a villain arc and more like a reckoning. Attending mandated anger management sessions where he is forced to confront his triggers, his impulse control, and the terrifying ease with which rage can eclipse reason. And these scenes are raw and uncomfortable, deliberately so, because the young and the restless refuses to let Adam hide behind charm or tragedy, instead demanding that he sit with the full weight of what he has done. And when Adam finally admits aloud that he hit Connor because he felt rejected, because he heard in his son's words the same dismissal Victor has hurled at him his entire life, the confession lands like a gut punch, exposing the naked vulnerability beneath Adam's bravado. And yet confession does not equal absolution, a fact the show makes painfully clear as Chelsea remains resolute in her boundaries, insisting that Adam must prove change through consistent action rather than grand gestures, and the custody implications loom ever larger, with whispered conversations about restraining orders and supervised visitation underscoring the gravity of the situation, reminding viewers that love does not exempt anyone from consequences. And when the biological father is finally revealed, a twist layered with betrayal, shock, and moral complexity, the revelation only deepens the emotional quagmire, because this man, whoever he is thrust into Connor's life not as a savior but as a stranger burdened with impossible expectations, forced to navigate a child's fractured trust and a community already bristling with judgment. And Connor, caught in the crossfire, grapples with conflicting emotions, curiosity battling loyalty, resentment tangling with hope, as he wonders whether biology matters more than the years Adam spent raising him, reading him stories, teaching him to ride a bike, because the cruel irony is that Adam may not be Connor's biological father, but he is undeniably the man who shaped his childhood, for better and for worse, and that complexity refuses to resolve neatly. And as weeks turn into months, Genoa City remains restless, haunted by the image of that slap and what it represents, a warning about unchecked trauma, about the seductive lie that love alone can heal deep wounds, and about the devastating cost of secrets withheld too long. And in one of the most haunting moments of the arc, Adam watches Connor from a distance at the park, laughing tentatively with Chelsea, and the sight breaks him in a way no enemy ever could, because he understands that the greatest punishment is not exile or public condemnation, but the possibility that the person you love most may never look at you the same way again, and the storyline crescendos not with revenge or triumph, but with quiet, painful introspection, as characters grapple with the realization that some damage cannot be undone, only acknowledged, and that the path forward, if there is one, requires humility, patience, and an unflinching commitment to doing better, and in true Young and the Restless fashion. The question lingers long after the credits roll. Can Adam break the cycle that defined his life? Or is the Newman legacy destined to repeat itself, leaving another generation to pick up the shattered pieces of love, identity, and trust? The tragedy, however, keeps unfolding in quieter, more insidious ways, because the deepest wounds in Genoa City are no longer explosive but slow and psychological, seeping into daily routines and silences, and Connor's world becomes defined not by dramatic confrontations but by absences. The empty chair where Adam used to sit during breakfast, the unanswered texts, the way adults lower their voices when he walks into a room, and these absences speak louder than any argument ever could, teaching Connor lessons no child should have to learn about fragility, about how quickly love can transform into something unsafe, and Chelsea, vigilant and exhausted, watches every micro-expression on her son's face, second-guessing herself at night, wondering whether she missed warning signs, whether she could have prevented the moment that changed everything, and her guilt becomes a quiet counterpoint to Adam's self-loathing. Because while Adam is consumed by shame for what he did, Chelsea is haunted by the fact that she trusted him to be different, trusted that the cycle would end with him, and as the town debates blame and responsibility, Connor internalizes a far more dangerous narrative, that somehow the truth about his DNA caused the rupture, that his very existence destabilizes the people he loves, and this belief begins to surface in subtle ways, in how he apologizes too quickly, how he avoids expressing anger, how he becomes overly compliant, desperate not to provoke another eruption. And therapists recognize this as the most alarming fallout of all, the early shaping of a child who believes safety depends on suppressing himself, and meanwhile Adam's attempts at redemption falter under the weight of impatience, because he wants forgiveness on a timeline that soothes his pain rather than honors Connor's healing, and each time he pushes, each time he pleads or rationalizes, he only reinforces the truth that he still struggles to put his son's needs above his own, and Victor watches all of this with a calculating eye, torn between his instinct to protect the Newman name and the dawning realization that perhaps the name itself is the problem, that legacy without accountability is just another form of abandonment, and for the first time in decades Victor hesitates, a pause so subtle most would miss it, but Nikki notices, sensing that even the great Victor Newman may finally be confronting the wreckage left in his wake, and Nick, increasingly stepping into a stabilizing role for Connor, becomes the embodiment of what Adam might have been under different circumstances, patient, present, willing to absorb anger without returning it, and this contrast cuts Adam deeply, forcing him to confront the painful truth that love is not defined by intensity, but by consistency, and as the biological father's presence becomes more pronounced, adding yet another emotional variable to an already volatile equation, the story resists easy villains or heroes, instead offering a raw meditation on family as both refuge and risk, and in the end what lingers most powerfully is not the shock of the DNA reveal, or even the violence of the slap, but the question it leaves behind, whether knowing the truth, however painful, is still better than living a lie, and whether breaking generational cycles requires more than awareness, demanding instead the courage to endure distance, discomfort, and the possibility that love sometimes means letting go. And as Genoa City moves forward, restless as ever, the echoes of this moment remain, etched into its collective memory, a reminder that the most devastating betrayals are not always born of malice, but of unhealed wounds passed down until someone finally dares to stop the pattern, no matter the cost. And in those final, fragile moments, the story settles into a haunting stillness, because healing in Genoa City is never loud or immediate. It happens in pauses, in small choices, in the decision not to repeat what came before, and Connor, standing at the edge of a new understanding of family, begins to learn that fathers are defined not by blood or rage, but by safety, while Adam, watching from the outside, is forced to confront the hardest truth of all, that loving a child sometimes means accepting their distance without resentment, without demands, and without guarantees, and this acceptance, painful as it is, becomes Adam's first real step toward breaking the cycle that shaped him. As Chelsea holds firm to her boundaries, Victor grapples with the legacy of his own failures, and Genoa City bears witness to yet another chapter where truth arrives not as salvation but as a reckoning, leaving behind a quiet, aching question that lingers long after the storm has passed. Can a family rebuild when innocence has been lost? Or is the act of trying itself the only redemption any of them will ever truly know?